Life does not promise to divide advantage evenly. One man is born into opportunity, while another begins with debt, obligation, weak instruction, or no useful connections at all. One is introduced to the right person early. Another spends years learning what someone else was shown in an afternoon. Do not waste your life arguing with this reality. The world is not arranged to satisfy your personal sense of fairness, but your response remains entirely yours. That is where your power begins. You may not control the hand you are dealt, but you control whether you study it, waste it, complain about it, or play it intelligently. Tumbler. There are men who spend 20 years explaining why their position is unfair. Their explanation may be completely accurate, but that does not make it productive. Another man begins from the exact same poor position and asks a different question. What can I do with what remains? That single question creates movement. Do not confuse acknowledging injustice with surrendering to it. If you were treated unfairly, admit the fact. Accurate thinking requires truth, but truth is incomplete until you ask what follows. What will you do now? Once you ask that, responsibility returns to you. Blame is comfortable, but responsibility demands immediate action. Line. If an associate deceives you, and you spend the next 10 years refusing every sound opportunity out of fear, that dishonest associate is still governing your life. If an employer overlooks your work and you respond by becoming careless, bitter, and less useful, you are actively helping that injustice continue. Do not cooperate with what injured you. If life has already taken something from you, do not voluntarily give it more. If you lost money, do not also lose judgment. If you were insulted, do not also lose self-command. If a door closed unfairly, do not close every future door yourself. You cannot undo what happened, but you can refuse to multiply the damage. Set strict limits on adversity. A setback may affect your finances, but it does not automatically deserve authority over your identity. An undisciplined mind enlarges everything. One failure becomes, I always fail. And one dishonest person becomes, nobody can be trusted. Inaccurate language creates inaccurate decisions. Use precise facts instead. This opportunity failed. The specific plan needs revision. Facts are actionable. Vague hopelessness is not. Do not cooperate with what injured you. If life has already taken something, do not voluntarily give it more. Separating the event from your personal identity is the precise boundary where self-government under pressure begins. When an undisciplined mind encounters adversity, it immediately expands the scope of the injury. A single financial loss is transformed into a global declaration of personal inadequacy. A single act of betrayal by an associate is weaponized into a permanent philosophy that no human being can ever be trusted again. This emotional expansion feels justified in the heat of disappointment, but it destroys your ability to make accurate, intelligent decisions. Inaccurate language produces inaccurate choices. If you tell yourself that nothing ever works, you naturally stop experimenting. If you convince yourself that you always lose, you begin expecting defeat long before any objective evidence appears. Your own flawed interpretation becomes a far heavier obstacle than the initial unfairness ever was. Real emotional discipline demands absolute precision in your language and your thoughts. Look at the problem directly, count the actual loss, measure the debt, examine the mistake, and then ask what specific assets and options remain under your control. And constructive attitude does not mean smiling foolishly at severe difficulty or pretending that an injustice did not take place. It means refusing to allow difficulty to destroy your capacity to reason cleanly. Look at the facts without becoming the facts. You may have lost a contract, but that does not turn you into a loser. You may have been deceived, but that does not condemn you to remain a fool forever. The event belongs entirely to history. Your identity is actively under construction today. Comparison is the secondary trap that transforms external unfairness into internal self-punishment. You look at another man's public results, observe his smooth path, and immediately judge what your own life lacks. You see his visible advantages, but you remain entirely blind to his private facts, his hidden struggles, or the specific costs he carries. Comparing your internal knowledge of your own friction against another man's external showcase is an absurd and unproductive exercise, even when his advantage is entirely real. When he received better schooling, inherited capital, or was handed early introductions, resentment produces zero useful leverage. You cannot go backward in time to claim someone else's childhood or inherit another man's financial beginning. Mourning past advantages that were denied to you consumes the exact focus required to build present movement. Concentration on your own next move matters infinitely more than global fairness. You do not need every player on the field to start with equal resources for you to make tangible, measurable progress. You only need to retain control over your immediate initiative. There is almost always an area where initiative still belongs to you. You can sharpen a technical skill, eliminate a wasteful habit, adjust your daily speech, seek expert counsel, or make one difficult decision you have been avoiding for months. These actions may not retroactively erase the original injustice, but they completely alter your position relative to it. Personal initiative is your true rebellion against bad circumstances. You declare, I did not choose this starting point, but I will decide what I construct from it. When you adopt this stance, preparation itself begins to alter your internal psychology. A man who feels trapped in a dead-end occupation or a restrictive environment feels utterly helpless only as long as he remains completely passive. The moment he begins quietly spending his evenings building a secondary skill, saving small reserves of capital, or researching alternative markets, his psychological relationship to his hardship changes entirely. Hardship acquires a definitive boundary because he knows his current condition is temporary. He is no longer waiting for someone to grant him a better life. He is actively acquiring the capacity to enter it unbalanced. Never permit one employer, one client, one partner, or one investor to hold exclusive ownership over your future. A man with zero options is forced to tolerate mistreatment and unfair conditions because he has no alternative path. A man who has quietly cultivated skill, financial reserves, a clean reputation, and reliable associations possesses the practical capability to say no. Extract the structural principle from every setback without absorbing the emotional poison. The man who absorbs only the poison becomes smaller and more bitter after every defeat. The man who extracts the principle becomes sharper, stronger, and far more dangerous to his obstacles. Again, look at the facts without becoming the facts. The event belongs entirely to history. You are actively under construction today. Resentment is frequently mistaken for memory. A man convinces himself that if he lets go of his anger, he is somehow forgetting the betrayal or minimizing the wrong done to him. But holding on to bitterness is not memory. It is emotional infection. You can retain the exact facts of an event and use them to construct better boundaries without poisoning every future decision you make. Write the lesson directly into your conduct. If a past betrayal exposed a flaw in how you verify character more strictly. If an unexpected loss exposed a lack of financial reserves, build those reserves immediately. When you do this, memory ceases to be an open wound and becomes solid structure, blends. The moment you organize your identity around being the person who was treated badly, your growth stops. At first, telling the story of your pain offers comfort and explains your friction. But over time, that narrative becomes your mental headquarters. Every new disappointment is logged as additional proof of a hostile world. Every success is dismissed as a temporary fluke, and every genuine opportunity is viewed with deep suspicion. You stop describing the past and start living permanently inside it. Your life sequence must show forward movement. This happened, this was learned, this was changed, and this was built. Stop waiting for life to stage a public apology. Many men waste decades mentally demanding that the exact person who wronged them admits their fault, or that the specific institution that rejected them comes crawling back. Your victory does not require the cooperation, confession, or regret of those who injured you. Building a future that depends on yesterday apologizing first is a subtle form of self-sabotage. You deal with today. Ask yourself what skill can be sharpened right now, what weak habit can be eliminated, and what actionable opportunity can be created instead of awaited. Present action is the only place where past unfairness can be converted into useful power. Band, do not confuse emotional intensity with real progress. You can spend an entire evening rehearsing hypothetical arguments, imagining what you should have said, and fueling your rage over an old injustice. At the end of that evening, your skill remains undeveloped, your reserves remain empty, and your position has not improved by a single millimeter. Anger is an extraordinarily expensive, dirty fuel. It burns hot, damages your judgment, and corrodes the machinery of your mind when used too long. Purpose is cleaner, cooler, and far more durable. Build because the work itself is worthy, because your family benefits, and because freedom matters, not because you are desperately waiting for an audience of doubters to applaud. Blind. When you strip revenge out of your motivation, your decisions instantly become clearer. You stop taking foolish, impatient risks just to project temporary success to people who aren't even paying attention. You gain the patience to stay in preparation as long as necessary. The composure to reject bad deals that look impressive on the surface, and the humility to change direction. When a plan fails, you stop forcing every daily setback to answer a massive existential question about your self-worth. A lost deal simply means the deal was lost due to poor timing, weak preparation, or market preference. Address the specific breakdown, adjust your strategy, and keep moving forward. Lined. Life may be unfair, but do not make your ego another unfair judge. Some men treat every setback as a final verdict on their personal worth. That is unnecessary self-punishment. A lost contract says the contract was lost. It reveals poor timing, weak preparation, or another man's choice. But it says nothing about your permanent capacity. Ask a narrower, more objective question. What does this specific failure teach me about the next attempt? That question produces information, and information can be organized into progress. Vague identity wounds are almost impossible to organize because they are rooted in raw emotion. Specific facts can always be solved through disciplined action. Build a future that does not require yesterday to apologize first. Like one of the most irritating tests of character occurs when life appears to openly reward people you do not respect. You watch a careless man advance, a dishonest competitor profit, or an underqualified individual receive an introduction you worked years to deserve. Your internal sense of justice rebels, and the temptation arrives to say, why should I maintain high standards when shortcuts and low standards are rewarded? The answer is simple: because another man's compromise does not determine your standard. If another man's dishonesty tempts you into abandoning your integrity, he has dictated your character without ever speaking a single word to you. Never grant anyone that level of power over your life. Blean standards are valuable precisely because they are not up for negotiation. Every time someone else behaves poorly, you decide what kind of conduct you will build a life upon, and then you maintain that standard because you have to live with the man your choices create. A dishonest man may gain immediate cash while quietly bankrupting his future credibility. A careless man may land a high position only to have his incompetence brutally exposed under pressure. You do not see their full accounting sheet. So stop trying to audit every man's life. Your own work requires every ounce of your available attention. Be exceptionally vigilant about the associates you choose. After experiencing unfairness, pain makes men hungry for agreement, when what they actually need is truth. Out of fear, you may retreat into circles of people who confirm your bitterness, agree with your grievances, and tell you that effort is futile. That is not a mastermind alliance, it is a council of defeat. You need friends and advisors who validate reality while demanding execution. People who will hear your grievance, acknowledge the difficulty, and then ask, now, what is your next move? Keep people around you who are capable of sharp, constructive honesty. Maturity is the capacity to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at once. A situation may have been genuine favoritism or betrayal, yet your own preparation, timing, or judgment may have also been. You do not have to choose between blaming yourself for everything and blaming the world for everything. Separate the causes carefully. What belonged to circumstance? What belonged to others? What belonged to you? Own your percentage completely and correct it immediately. If 10% of the failure was your fault, fix that 10% with ruthless speed. That is where your actual leverage resides. Self-reliance is not the arrogant declaration that you need no one. It is the intelligent acceptance of responsibility for securing what you need. If you lack education, seek it. If you lack capital, study value creation. If you lack strong associations, become so useful that high-value people welcome your presence. The victim mindset asks, why was I denied a chance? The self-reliant mindset asks, where else can I construct one? That shift in orientation keeps open gates visible, even when a primary door has been slammed in your face. Git. A man who wants fair treatment should build enough independence that unfair treatment becomes far too costly for those who attempt it. Do not merely demand respect from a hostile environment. Increase your fundamental ability to walk away from disrespect. This takes time, patience, and unyielding labor. Start immediately, build financial margins, cultivate undeniable competence, protect your reputation, and establish alternative channels. These form your quiet power. They reduce helplessness, and removing helplessness completely transforms your character because you begin meeting every future difficulty from conscious choice rather than desperation. Okay? Standards are valuable precisely because they are not negotiated every time someone else behaves poorly. Okay? Person must never be confused with begging the same locked door for permission. True persistence means retaining your aim while remaining completely flexible about the route. If an employer ignores you, build undeniable evidence of your competence elsewhere. If one investor rejects your proposal, refine the mechanics and present it to another. Do not spend 5 years pounding on a dead end out of an obsession with vindication. Ask yourself honestly, do you want the actual objective? Or do you merely want this specific person to validate you? If the objective matters, move on. Freedom is realizing your future does not require a courtroom where every old wrong is finally corrected. Shift your focus entirely from fairness to usefulness. What problem can you solve? What tangible value can you construct? Production has a profound healing effect on the mind. A man actively producing quality work stops leaning on old wounds to explain his current position. The work speaks louder than the narrative. However, do not use relentless labor as a mechanism to numb your feelings. Strength is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to feel deep disappointment, acknowledge the hit, and remain firmly governed by your core principles. When you gain authority, power, or financial scale, you will face the final test of character, refusing to recreate the very injustices you once suffered. Unexamined pain frequently reproduces itself. The man who was underpaid becomes the manager who squeezes his workers. The man who is humiliated becomes the leader who belittles his subordinates, calling it the way of the world. Break that chain entirely. Let your past friction make you more just, more transparent, and more merit-driven in every domain you control. Convert what you hated into an unshakable standard for what you will never reproduce. The ultimate test is continuing to live well and work cleanly when ... there is no guarantee that fairness will arrive on your preferred schedule. That means you stop bargaining with principle. You do not say you will stay honest only if it pays this month, or disciplined only if the reward arrives this quarter. You decide what kind of man you are building, and you act from that conviction regardless of short-term weather. When your conduct ceases to be dictated by temporary circumstances, you take ultimate authority back. You become untouchable, steady, and entirely sovereign over your path. A man who governs himself after unfairness becomes an immovable source of stability for everyone around him. He does not spread bitterness down, nor does he demand that innocent people suffer simply because his own path was hard. He uses his past struggles to sharpen his judgment, elevate his leadership, and build better structures. By doing so, his response permanently breaks a cycle of grievance that might otherwise have continued for generations. You cannot force the world to be fair, but you can ensure that your own actions, agreements, and character remain unassailable. Convert what you hated into an unshakable standard for what you will never reproduce.